The first time Yenny Salveth walked into my barn, she was 4 years old by her reckoning and small enough that the door handle was over her head. Her mother had to open it for her. Then Yenny went in alone, because that was the agreement they had already worked out in the road outside, and I heard her mother say, in the careful voice adults use with children who will not be talked out of anything, "You may look at them. You may not carry them." She carried one within a minute. I came out of the back room, and there she was in the straw, a moss hair pressed to her chest with both hands, her small pale face gone quiet with the particular seriousness of a child who has just been given the thing she has been asking the universe for. The moss hair had gone quiet too. They do that when they trust you. It is the whole trick of them. Her mother was standing in the doorway watching. She had not come inside. Merve Salveth was tall for her people, and thin the way officers get when the season is long, and she had the faint blue-gray dorsal patterning along her temples that on the Ivernai reads the way a pulse reads on a human wrist, a thing you are not supposed to look at directly and cannot help looking at anyway. She saw the moss hair in her daughter's arms. She saw me see it. She said, without heat, Yenny. What did we say? I know, Yenny said. She did not put the moss hair down. She looked up at me instead, waiting to see whether I would be the kind of adult who ratified the mother or the kind who conspired with the child. I said, she's holding it right. It's not scared. Merve looked at me for a long moment. Her patterning did not change. Then she said, 5 minutes, and stepped back onto the porch to give her daughter the 5 minutes without a witness. That was the beginning. I did not know it was the beginning. I thought it was one visit. My name is Corin Ash. I run the creature care station at the west end of Little Fen, in the valley they call Marin's Bend on the colony world of Torhelm. I am human. I have been on Torhelm for 11 years. My wife Anais died in the 2nd year of a lung fever that came through the settlement before the medical shipment did, and I stayed on because the barn was hers first, and I did not have anywhere I wanted to go more than I wanted to stay near what she had made. The station takes in injured native fauna and the small domestic creatures the Ivernai keep, moss hares mostly, and vent crickets, and the flat gray lizards that eat aphids off the grain, and it does not pay for itself exactly, but it pays for enough of itself that I have not had to close it. The Ivernai settled Torhelm 3 generations before we did. There are more of them here than us by a factor of about 8. In Little Fen it is closer to 15. I am one of 2 humans in the valley. The other is old Petra Eilisk, who runs the seed store and does not come out in winter. Merve Salveth is the district ecological officer. She works out of a small office above the grain hall and covers the whole northeast quadrant of the valley on foot and by skimmer. When a moss hare colony is displaced by a landslip, she brings me the survivors. When a farmer's paddock lizard breaks its back leg on a fence, she brings me the lizard. She has been bringing me things for 6 years. For the first 4 of those years she brought them alone. For the last 2 she has brought Yenny. Yenny is 6 now. She is small even for an Ivernai child. Her patterning is not yet full. It comes in slowly over the first 10 years, deepening from the pale silver of infancy to whatever color the adult will settle into. Hers is coming in the same blue-gray as her mother's, which apparently is unusual and which apparently pleases her enormously. She told me about it. She tells me most things. My mother's father had gray, she told me once, standing on the wooden crate I keep by the moss hair pens so short people can see in. And my mother has gray, and I will have gray. Kevrin had gold, but I did not get any gold. Kevrin was her father. He died 2 winters ago in a wildfire. He was trying to steer away from a moss hair colony in the upper pass. He almost got them all out. Merve told me this exactly once, at the end of a long afternoon in my kitchen, in the tone of a person reciting a fact she has already made peace with the shape of, and does not intend to discuss further. I did not ask her anything else. I have not asked her anything else since. For the last year Yenny has come with her mother on nearly every visit. For the last 6 months she has been coming without her mother, walking down from the ecology office after school, letting herself into the barn, doing the small jobs I have taught her, refilling water dishes, weighing the recovering moss hairs, sitting very still with the ones that need to be sat still with. She is better at that last part than most adults. It is a rare thing in a child, patience of that quality. It is a rare thing in anyone. Merve picks her up at the end of the afternoon. She stands in the doorway and does not come in. She says, "Yenny, coat." Yenny gets her coat. Merve says, "Thank you, Mr. Ash." I say she's welcome any time. Merve says, "I know." Then they go. We have been doing this for 6 months, and I have been aware, for perhaps 4 of those 6, that something in the routine has begun to press against its own walls. I have been aware that Merve does not quite look at me when she says "thank you." I have been aware that when I say she's welcome any time I mean the child, and I also mean something else that I have not put into a sentence, because putting it into a sentence would be a kind of intrusion I have not earned the right to. I am 39. I have been a widower for 9 years. I did not think this was going to happen again. I did not go looking for it to happen again. It has been happening anyway, quietly, in the doorway of my own barn, for months. I have not said a word about it, neither has she. The letter from the regional service came in the 2nd week of the term. That is what the Ivernai call the shift from autumn into winter, when the light goes thin, and the wind starts to smell like the high snow. The letter said that the Colonial Veterinary Service was consolidating its rural stations, and that mine, being one of the smallest on the eastern continent, was going to be folded into the larger station at Haverford, 60 kilometers south. I would be offered a position there. My barn at Little Fen would be maintained as a satellite for 1 more year, and then closed. I read the letter twice. Then I put it on the kitchen table and made tea and drank the tea and read the letter a 3rd time. Haverford is a real town. It has paved streets and a proper clinic and 3 other veterinarians and a salary I have not earned in a decade. It is a good offer. It is, on paper, the offer I should have taken years ago. I did not want to take it. I wanted to stay in the barn that Anais had helped me build, and I wanted the small pale child to come down the road from the ecology office at the end of the school day, and I wanted her mother to stand in the doorway in the last of the light and say "Thank you, Mr. Ash **, and I wanted to keep not saying the sentence I had not said. I did not know how to explain any of that to the service. I was not sure I could explain it to myself. I put the letter in the drawer under the seed catalog and went out to feed the moss hares. Merve came by 3 days later with an injured vent cricket in a jar. She stood in the doorway. She did not come in. I said, "I got a letter from the service." She said, "I know. Everyone got a letter, all the small stations. Haverford is taking 3 of them." I said, "You knew already." "The office was informed," she said, "last week." "You didn't say." She looked at me. Her patterning did not change. She said it wasn't mine to say. I nodded. I took the jar from her. The vent cricket was going to be fine. It had cracked one of its outer plates and needed a splint and a week of quiet. I told her that. She nodded. She stood in the doorway. I said, "I haven't answered them yet." She said, "I see." That was all she said. I see. She did not ask what I was going to answer. She did not tell me what she thought I should answer. She said, "I see," and then she said, "Yenny will come by tomorrow after school," and then she said, "Thank you, Mr. Ash," and then she went. I stood in the doorway of the barn with a cracked vent cricket in a jar, and I watched her walk up the road to the ecology office, and I thought, she will not ask me to stay. She will not ever ask me to stay. She has already lost 1 person to a thing he was trying to do that was bigger than the room they were standing in, and she will not open her mouth to try to keep another one in the room. It is not in her. I thought, and I am going to have to be the one to say it, and I do not know how. The Turn Supper is the biggest gathering of the year in Little Fen. Every household in the valley brings a dish to the community hall, and the tables are pushed together into one long line down the middle of the floor, and everyone eats. The children run in and out. The adults drink the pale amber cider the Ivern I make from the fruit of the ridge thorn, which is stronger than it tastes, and they talk about the harvest and the weather and whose skimmer needs a new intake filter before the snow. It goes on until the small hours. I have gone every year since Anais died. I do not stay late. I bring a pot of the root stew she used to make, and I sit at the human end of the table, which is to say the end where Petra Ilisk sits, and I nod at people, and I go home when the cider comes out. This year I brought the stew and I sat next to Petra, and I nodded at people, and I was 3 spoonfuls into my bowl when Yenny Salveth appeared at my elbow with a moss hare in her arms. "You are not supposed to have brought that asterisk," I said. "I know," she said. She was very calm about it. She was scared to be left, so I brought her under my coat. "Your mother is going to be furious." "She already knows," Yenny said. "She said if I brought her I had to keep her under the table and not let anyone see, but I wanted to show you." I looked. The moss hare was one of ours, one of the Ridge Colony survivors from the summer, small and pale and perfectly quiet in the cradle of the child's arms. It looked at me with the bright black eye of a creature that has been carried by exactly the right person. "She's beautiful asterisk," I said. "Put her back under your coat before Elder Vashon sees." Yenny put her back under her coat. She did not go. She stood at my elbow. I moved down the bench and made room, and she climbed up next to me, and sat there with the moss hare hidden in the front of her coat, and ate a piece of my bread. That was how her mother found us, 10 minutes later, coming down the length of the table with a plate in her hand, and an expression that was doing several things at once, and did not quite settle on any of them. Merave sat down across from us. She said, "Yenny." "I know," Yenny said. "Under the coat." "She is under the coat." "And she stays there." "Yes." Merave looked at me. She said, "I am sorry." I said, "It's fine. She's the best behaved animal in the room." Murave's patterning did the thing it does, the very faint deepening along her temples that I have learned means something is moving in her that she has not decided to let out. She looked down at her plate. She said, "Thank you, Mr. Ash." "Corin asterisk," I said. I had been meaning to say it for months. I said it now because the child was between us and it felt safer to say it with a child between us. "Please, Corin." She looked up. She said, "Corin." She said it carefully, the way she said everything, and her patterning deepened another shade, and she looked down at her plate again. Yenny, next to me, was eating my bread and watching both of us with the openly interested face of a child who has been listening to a conversation adults thought was about bread. Elder Vashon came down the table half an hour later. He is a tall old Ivranai with a full gray patterning that runs from his temples all the way down the backs of his hands, which on their people is a mark of a long life well carried. He stopped at our section of the bench and put his hand on my shoulder in the human way, which he had learned from me and which he did every year, and he said, "Mr. Ash, we heard about the letter." The whole table did not go quiet. It was not that kind of gathering. But the 4 or 5 people nearest us did, in the small way that adjacent conversation goes when it becomes aware of a more interesting one. I said yes. "Haverford asterisk," Elder Vashon said. "Yes. A good station." "It is." "You will be missed here," he said, with the courtesy of a man who did not want to presume that I had made a decision I had not yet announced. I opened my mouth to answer him. I was going to say something careful. I was going to say, "I haven't decided yet asterisk," or "I'm still thinking about it," or one of the several sentences I had been rehearsing in the barn all week without ever quite finishing. I looked at Merave across the table to see her face. Her face was perfectly composed. Her patterning was perfectly still. She was looking at her plate. She was not going to look up. She was not going to say anything. She was not going to make it any easier for me, and she was not going to make it any harder, because that was who she was, and she had decided a long time ago that she was not going to be the person who asked anyone to stay for her. I opened my mouth. I said, Mom wants you to stay, Yenny said. She said it clearly. She said it in the ordinary voice of a child correcting an adult who has gotten the facts of a situation slightly wrong. She was holding the moss hair inside her coat with both hands, and she was looking up at Elder Vashon because he was the tallest person present, and it seemed to her that he was the one who needed the information. She said so last week, Yenny added helpfully, in the kitchen. She said, if he goes to Haverford, I do not know what I am going to do, and then she put her head down on the table, so he should stay. The silence at our end of the bench was total. Murave's patterning went. I do not know a better word for what it did. It flooded, from the pale blue-gray it had been all evening, to a deep bruised indigo that ran from her temples down the sides of her neck and into the collar of her shirt, and out along the backs of her hands where they rested on the edge of the table. Her face itself did not change expression. She was too disciplined for that. But her whole body had lit up with the color that, on her people, means the thing you have been holding in has come out of you without your permission, and there is nothing you can do about it, and everyone can see. She set her spoon down very carefully. She said, in a voice that was almost level, Yenny. What? Yenny said. Under the coat. She is under the coat. You too, Murave said. Then she stood up from the bench and she walked out of the community hall without looking at me or at Elder Vashon or at anyone else, and the door swung shut behind her, and Elder Vashon, who had been standing with his hand on my shoulder the whole time, cleared his throat once and said, very quietly, Mr. Ash, I think perhaps. Yes, I said. I got up. Yenny said, are you going after her? I said yes. Yenny nodded, satisfied, and went back to eating my bread. She was on the back porch of the hall in the cold without her coat. Her patterning was still indigo. It was going to be indigo for a while. I did not say anything at first. I stood in the doorway with the noise of the supper behind me, and I let the door shut so it would be just the two of us and the wind coming down off the ridge, and I did not go closer to her because I had not been invited to, and I said, after a while, Murave. She said, please don't. I said, don't what? Don't be kind about it. She was not looking at me. She was looking out at the dark yard where the skimmers were parked. Please, she is 6. She reads a room in ways I have spent a decade learning how to hide, and she does not know yet that some things are not for saying, and I do not want you to be kind about it. I want you to go back inside and tell Elder Vashon you are going to Haverford, and I want us to go on the way we have been going on until you go. And then I want you to go, and I do not want you to have been kind to me about this in the meantime, because I will not survive being kind to about this. Do you understand me? She was still not looking at me. Her hands on the porch rail were flooded indigo to the wrist. I said I wasn't going to be kind about it. She said nothing. I said I was going to tell him I wanted to stay. She turned her head, she looked at me. Her patterning did not fade. If anything, it went deeper. I said I have wanted to stay for about 8 months. I have not said so because I did not know how to say so without making you responsible for a thing you did not ask to be responsible for. I was going to try to say it tonight, and I did not know how to start, and your daughter started for me, and I am sorry that she did it in front of Elder Vashon, and I am not sorry that she did it. I would like to stay, if you would like me to. She looked at me for a long time. The wind came down off the ridge and moved her hair, and she did not move to fix it. Her patterning began, very slowly, to lift back toward the blue-gray it usually was, not all the way, halfway. She said that, in the kitchen last week. I did not know she had heard me. She hears everything, I said. Yes, Murave made a small sound that was almost a laugh and was mostly not. Yes, she does. I said, Murave. She said, I have not asked anyone for anything in 2 years. I did not intend to start tonight. I said you didn't ask, she asked for you, and I'm answering her. She looked at me. She said very quietly, then answer her. I said I am staying. Her patterning went the rest of the way back. It did not go pale. It settled at the shade of blue-gray that I had been looking at across doorways for 2 years, and she took a breath that went all the way down to somewhere she had not let a breath go in a long time, and she said, "All right." That was all she said. All right. But she was looking at me when she said it, and she did not look away after, and after a moment she reached across the space between us and took my hand in hers. The first time she had ever touched me, and the backs of her hands where the patterning ran were warm against my skin, warmer than I had expected, and she held on. We stood there on the porch for a while. Neither of us said anything else. The wind came down off the ridge. Inside the hall, someone had started playing the small reed pipe the Ivor and I play at turn, the low, slow one, and the noise of the supper had softened around it the way noise does around music. After a while she said, "We should go back in. She will be worried." I said, "She will not be worried. She will be eating my bread." Merve made the small sound again. This time it was more of a laugh. She said, "Yes, she will be eating your bread." She did not let go of my hand. We went back in together. Elder Vashon looked at us when we came back to the table. He did not say anything. He nodded once, in the slow, careful way old Ivor and I nod when a thing has been settled that they were not going to be the one to settle, and he moved on down the bench to talk to someone else about a skimmer intake filter. Yenny looked up from my bread. She looked at her mother's face, and at my face, and at our hands where they were still holding each other on top of the table, and she said, in the same clear, ordinary voice she had used before, "Good." Then she went back to the bread. Merve's patterning did the deepening thing again, very briefly, and she said, "Yenny." "What?" "Nothing." "Okay," Yenny said. She held up the front of her coat. The moss hair looked out with its bright black eye. "She wants to come out now. She is not scared anymore." "She stays under the coat," Merve said. "She is very quiet." "Under the coat." "Okay," Yenny said, and put the moss hair back, and did not seem particularly disappointed. She had, after all, already gotten the thing she came for. The moss hair was extra. I wrote to the service the next morning. I told them I would not be taking the Haverford position. I told them I would like to continue running the little Fen station under whatever arrangement they could make work. 2 weeks later they wrote back and said the station would be maintained as a satellite of Haverford on a permanent basis, at a reduced stipend, and that I would be responsible for my own supplies. I wrote back and said that would be fine. The barn has expanded since then. Not physically, it is the same barn Anais and I built. But Yenny comes down every afternoon now, and Merve comes down most evenings, and on the weekends the three of us do the feeding together. And Yenny has decided that the moss hair she carried under her coat at the turn supper is hers specifically, and has named her Ani. And Ani now lives in a padded box in Yenny's room and comes to the barn on Yenny's shoulder to visit the others. There are more of us in the barn now than there used to be. The barn feels bigger for it. It is the same barn. Merve still stands in the doorway sometimes at the end of the afternoon and says thank you, Corin *, in the careful voice that is her voice. But she comes inside afterward. And in the evening when the light goes, she does not go back to the ecology office. She stays. Yenny was right about that part. Yenny is right about most things. She is 6, and she reads a room in ways her mother spent a decade learning to hide. And one evening at the community supper, she looked up at the tallest man at the table and told him a fact he needed to know, and her mother was completely embarrassed, and I am staying. I am staying.